E taiwe, wai tiao, I tuno kena atia ono. Da iri mukaro aguibana, boriken taino daka. I just wanted to greet you in my own indigenous language. My name is Mbororo. I'm from the indigenous Taino community from the island of Boriken, which some of you may know today as Puerto Rico. And I work with the International Indian Treaty Council. I am the UN Programs and Communications Coordinator for the IITC. And I'm very honored to be asked to moderate this panel of some really dynamic frontline and international advocates that we've worked together. I have had the honor to work with them in international forums. We worked together in Paris for the climate change agreement. Some of you might remember or can think back to the presentation that Andrea Carmen did just earlier, and how we really fought to get the language of indigenous people's rights into that document, which may not seem like a lot to many, but if you know if you were there and saw the struggle, I know Kim was there, and that we had to get that language in there, you know, it's a lot of work. And so I'm very proud and honored to be with them. We've already cut into some of our time. So basically, this panel is going to just talk about the links of people who work locally, but also take their issues to the international level, to places like the United Nations, and why that might be important, and why it might be important for some of you here, if you have not already, to engage or to be aware of those conversations going on at that level. And so, without further ado, I will introduce our first presenter, Ms. Tui Beth Shortland, who's also working with the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Biodiversity. She also is going to be presenting on her own local initiative, and she could tell you a little bit more about that, but she's come all the way from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so please welcome her. And I'll be keeping time, unfortunately. And just before she starts, while she's just getting ready, I was asked by Suzanne from Cultural Survival to remind folks, there's a table out there with some materials, and you might see this little thing here. It kind of slaps around your wrist, but there's a USB here. This has all the radio shows, quite a number of them, from their different interviews that they've done with indigenous people. So it's not just a pretty bracelet, it actually has something, some interesting stuff. There's also a climate change questionnaire that we have out there, and it would be great if some of you could take that back to your indigenous communities, and we can continue to input that into some of the work that we're doing with IITC on that issue. So thank you very much, and please welcome Tui.
Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed lunch. Thank you to the organisers of this conference. This is my first Rising Voices, and so I'm really excited to be here to share with you all and to meet other like-minded people. So I'm the director of Te Kopu, Pacific Indigenous and Local Knowledge Centre. I have a few slides, but I'm not going to read it word for word. You can see what's up there. We're a regional organisation. We're established to promote Indigenous rights, particularly around our rights to our ancestral domains. And we have members. We're quite a small team within Te Kopu Centre, but we focus our energy on our member Indigenous organisations throughout the Pacific. And there's a list up there of where they're from. We have 2 Indigenous youth organisations. We're only new and we haven't done a big membership drive yet, but we're excited about the growing network that we have. We're also part of our organisation, which sits beside us, is a charter school called Te Kapi Whetū. We have 500 students, up to university entrance, and 6 early childhood centres. So part of Te Kopu is we also embed the traditional knowledge into the curriculum with the school. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of initiatives that we've had locally within our communities and how they have cascaded into national, regional and international fora. So the first one is around marine mammals. In Aotearoa, we're like the centre of the universe of where marine mammals strand. And so we used to do pelagic or sort of inshore hunting, but these days we don't need to because so many of them strand on our shores. And it's a customary tradition to continue our relationship to whales and to revere them and give them another life through utilising the oil for massage and medicine, the bone, which is often carved and gifted to chiefs and others to bond relationships between tribes, the sinew and tendons used for rope, that sort of thing. So this was outlawed in New Zealand and still is illegal to do. As you can see, we have reinvigorated the tradition initiated by our elders. We have one of the oldest whaling stations, the last to close in my mother's community. And so we still have living memory about the ceremonies when the whales come in and how to ensure that everybody is culturally safe. So around 15 years ago, we began to do this again, despite it being illegal. And over the years, we have carried out the first necropsy, which is like an autopsy on an animal to determine that the whale was killed by ship strike. We also, because we've done so many whales, you learn to know what the inside of whale should look like. So if we find unusual looking organs or ulcers or empty stomachs, then we would report that. And so this is a way that we've worked with universities back home and contributing to knowledge about marine mammals. The other impacts that we have seen is around the impacts of extractive industries and their sonar testing within our waters. We harvested 2 Bridie's whales not so long back who had the symptoms of the bends. So they had burst eye blood vessels, and we think that they were resting in the moana and the booms went off from the industry ships and they got a fright and they shot to the surface and they got the bends, and that was the cause of death for those whales. So these are some of the things that we're concerned at a local level, and we have held national capacity building to encourage other Māori in our country to take this up. We've written a whale kit, so it lists all the tools that you need, all the health and safety practices, the roles and things like that. And we've had requests from our relations across the Pacific, so we'd love to establish a regional capacity building workshop around this as well. Internationally, a few years ago, we were able to get a report confirmed by the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity that anthropogenic or human-caused noise underwater does impact on marine life. And so not only whales, who obviously they eco-source, locate through their heads, but also other marine life are impacted by anthropogenic noise as well. That's what that slide is talking about. We came together as Indigenous and local knowledge centres. There are 7 other Indigenous and local knowledge centres around the world, 1 in each Indigenous region. And so we share and network and collaborate together. And a part of that was with the Intergovernmental Policy Science Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So last year in November, Te Kupo, our organisation, hosted a Pacific Traditional Knowledge Expert meeting where we came together and talked about the health of our moana and our territories, and including what we are experiencing with marine mammals. So that report has just been finalised, and that will be going to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity as well as other conventions. The second example I'd like to talk about is eels. I'm from Ngāti Hine. We're in the Bay of Islands in the far north of Aotearoa. We're subtropical. We're close to where Te Tiriti, the Treaty of Waitangi, was signed. And we're inland and coastal people. So for us, eels is a livelihood species. It is a symbol for us of our sovereignty. It's the reason, eels are the reason why we have not needed to rely on other tribes outside of our territories to trade, because we've always had this sustainable food source. So from the 80s, the elders started to see the depletion of this eel stock, and they placed a traditional prohibition, temporary prohibition on the taking of eels by commercial fishermen, which we enforced within our waterways. We tried to get the ministry to also agree to that in a legal sense, but we're yet to get there. However, we did do an eel population survey with the National Institute for Water and Atmosphere that did show that the eel populations are declining. And we had the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment at the national level agree that the eels are endangered. We had an independent international panel come over and agree with us again and said that it should be taken off the commercial quota. And we held a national Māori eel symposium and encouraged the uptake of the way in which we monitor our eels, for us to, in each of our communities, use the same indicators and methods so that we can aggregate our information out of our valleys into national reports so that we can further move to make better legislation around their management. And so internationally, due to the eels, these eels, they migrate out to around Vanuatu, from what we know, to spawn. And it's all dependent on the climate. Normally it's the last rains of the summer when they'll run. The water needs to be a certain temperature, the atmosphere needs to be a certain temperature, all the stars align, and it all happens. And that's our traditional time to harvest eels, and we keep them in our swamp to eat during the year. So last year, the summers are getting drier and longer and hotter, and the climate wasn't right for them to run. And this year they still haven't run. We're only just coming into the rainy season now, so they have about 1 more month to run, and if they don't, then we'll lose the harvest again. So last year we took the issue to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child to do a submission on the impacts of climate change on our children. They put in their report, they agreed that there needs to be a health impact assessment carried out, and we've just recently confirmed with the local district health board to co-produce a health impact assessment on Ngāti Hine children in terms of the loss of migrations. And under the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, under the Global Biodiversity Outlook, which is kind of the report that the countries put together to say how they're achieving the Aichi targets and strategic plan. So the Biodiversity Outlook said that they weren't reporting very well on traditional knowledge. And so we as an Indigenous caucus said, well, we should put together our own Indigenous produced report on all of the targets. So we did that, and that was launched at the end of last year, and part of it, we gave the story of our eels in the report as well, and so we're hoping to gain movements there. Just my last slide, one last example I wanted to talk about is our coastal cultural health indicators. We have been working on, under the United Nations, again, Convention on Biological Diversity, this project around getting more and more communities to be doing your own cultural health indicator monitoring. And so we have piloted some coastal monitoring. It's been taken up by many Māori communities back home. And some of that could be around our cultural values, what our grandparents would expect to see when they went fishing, biosecurity threats. Being that we're subtropical in the far north, we're prone to new pests coming in from out of the Pacific. And so we need to ensure that we have in place communities ready to respond, who know when there is a strange thing in the waters, a strange crab or something else. And we've also embedded the indicator program within our school. We're just starting off small and testing it with some of our year 10s, and we'll be growing it throughout the school as well. So nationally, we have, as I said, many Māori have taken up coastal cultural health indicator monitoring. Recently, because it's all related to our rights to our coastal areas. Some of you may know about the Takutai Moana Bill, the Foreshore and Seabed Act that was put in place to take away our rights of sovereignty over our coast. Just April this year, within the Act, it said that we had to prove our customary relationship to our coast by a certain date, cut-off date in April. So we have lodged at the national level an urgent claim to the Waitangi Tribunal, and we're hoping for a change in the Act again. And regionally, we're currently putting together a proposal. This is for the Pacific, my Pacific relations out there. We're putting together a proposal to extend coastal cultural health indicator monitoring through the Pacific. Would like to pilot it with our member organisations so that we can collate, again, a Pacific regional report that we can take to the UN and other bodies around what our people are observing and our recommendations about how we can adapt and mitigate the effects that we're seeing. And we also, of course, see that as potential for us to inform the discussions around the Sustainable Development Goal 14 on oceans. So that's me. Kia ora.
All right, she's just going to get ready. What we're going to do is hold the questions until after all the presentations, just because we started a bit late, so we want to make sure they all get to present first. And so our next speaker will be Yanni Stefansson, who is representing the Sami Council, and she'll be coming up right now. And here she is.
Oh.
You ready?
Oh, lovely.
You good? Should I get a...
I hope you all can see me. At least I hope you can hear me. Roberto, how do I start this thing here?
Let me show you.
Okay.
So you can just press these arrows
Okay.
to go forward, and if you need to go backwards, that one.
Okay, perfect. So Börek, manumelia Yanni Stefansson and manne Jaireste Boahta. So my name is Yanni and I come from the Arctic region. I just noticed that I Sami Englished a bit there. I didn't know if you noticed my end. So I work for the Sami Council, which is an NGO in all of the states that the Sami people have our lands in, which is called Sápmi. This is a not completely true mapping. It's a map by our colonizers. I would say our area is a bit bigger than that, but it's mainly Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. I come from a reindeer herding family. We are pastoralists. I was brought up and I'm still living in a reindeer herding family. This is my baby sister with her mother, and her mother is teaching her to mark the calf in the ear rightly for an individual mark. I don't know if you can see, this is nighttime at ours with the midnight sun. And this is where I come from, is my community. I was brought up believing, and still believes, that everything, if the reindeer has a good life, then we will have a good life. So everything circulates for the reindeer, and that's also why I'm here today. Oh, I touched something. With that belief, when I was brought up as a young girl, and I started to hear about climate change from the elders, and from my father and all of the community, because we constantly talk about weather. And I also noticed on the news and in media that they didn't really know that much. So I asked my father, why don't they know this? And like, it's obvious, how can't they know this and understand this? And my father just said, well, we don't have an education in their system, so therefore they don't believe us. They don't validate our beliefs and our ways of knowing. So I got into science. I studied chemistry, environmental chemistry and organic chemistry. And with that, I moved into politics within the Sami Council. So the Sami Council, I work mainly in the Arctic Council, which is a a forum, international forum with the Arctic states, together with what's called permanent participants, which is with the indigenous peoples organizations in the Arctic. And you can see some of our logos on here. We collaborate on science, on pollutants, on toxins, on atmosphere, and make a lot of assessments, but we also have different groups in the Arctic Council that are working with cultural language, social issues that are circulating in the Arctic. And from this, when we work with science, we find it complicated, and we need guidance when it comes to using traditional knowledge within science, within the Western science combined, to reach our goal. So the indigenous organization within Arctic Council, we developed this fundamental principles of the use of traditional knowledge, which the colonizers call it. We might call it Sami Vuekajal, or indigenous knowledge, or whatever others, to help and guide the work in the Arctic Council. I want to share with you, this is what I work with now, together with also some UN forum, but also I have to work with European Union, since Sweden and Finland is in the EU as well. But my knowledge does not come from the science or from the Western systems. It's come from my community, so I always have to touch base within my communities. And next I want to share with you some of the issues that we do have. The Swedish state, for example, have a lot of history within mining issues. And this is LKAB, it's a huge mine in Kiruna, and they want to dig more, so therefore the Kiruna city is moving. It's a huge city in Sweden that are moving, and half of the Swedish population doesn't even know of it. We also have had difficulties with hydropower dams that forced us to leave our homelands. And I know that many of you could recognize the experience of leaving your home. We also have climate change with unreliable ices and avalanches crossing all the time. This is actually in the middle of my spring migration for the reindeers. So I got a text from my boyfriend right now when he was moving with the reindeers over huge lakes. So it's a great time for us, but it's also a very tough time to be a member of the family when you know that your fathers and families are out in the ice and they can break at any time. We also have predatorial issues, not the predators as such in many cases, but the politics behind this, and the people that are dealing with the politics who doesn't understand the predators itself. And the deforestation issues, together with huge lands that are lost in windmill parks. And I know that we need a shift, but who's going to pay for the shift to green energy, to renewable energy? And who is saying what's sustainable and not? This is a small community that are dealing with huge windmill parks, and they themselves have to go up to court to fight for their rights to the land and to fight for the reindeers' right to the land. They won some, but they also lost some. There's a huge corporation coming in on some indigenous people's land, and we ourselves need to defend those rights. So coming from that, so what some community did was actually mapping, putting GPS color on the reindeers to see and track the migration, because it wasn't enough for the governments that we told them where we are and how we migrate and how we use the land. We actually needed those GPS and those science in order to validate what we already knew. And this is a closer diagram showing the density of that area that's used in different times of migration. So with this science and the technology use that we can use today, with satellites going on and with our knowledge, we could use it in policy making, both international and national. Another good example I want to share with you is Laponia. It's a World Heritage Site, but that was only put in place because UNESCO was pushing for the Sami rights. Today, it is the people that are governing it, it's an NGO, and they are conducted of the municipality members. The Sami communities have members and the majority within that board, together with the Swedish APA. And it's governing the World Heritage Site, and the community members are involved, and they are conducting research, and they are gathering what's needed to be fixed, and within those communities, regulating the fishing within the lakes based on the traditional knowledge that they do have. And this is a great example, and I'm very sad that I don't know, that I don't hear about it more than it should be heard of. We also have these kind of movements that are coming from the local level. This was a mine within that was planned to be established on Sami land called Kallak. And then small leaders from the Sami communities started to raise their voices against these huge companies. And I think this is stories of places where people had to lead. And they just had to lead. They didn't want to lead or wish to lead, but they led the fight and the movement. And today we got it to the governments as well, and they said no to the mine. But that's mainly because of the international pushback we got through social media. One of the things that escalated is a body within the movements that was created with active Sami engaging. And up to COP, we had gatherings and made this joik, it's a singing from one of the greatest artists we have in Sápmi. It's called Gula Halat Vietnamin. In English, it could be translated into We Speak Earth, but it's more of we communicate Earth, because speaking is just one way, but communicating it's both ways. So it's mainly it's a joy for us, for the Sami people, to gather up and to believe in what you do have, but also to communicate that we might be the last people that actually know of our lands and can communicate in different ways. Also, some of the great things that happen, what can happen today within social media movements, was that Sami artists was also gathering and organizing. And up to COP21 in Paris, there was this Run for Your Life initiative. So they ran from Kiruna, the Swedish city, and down to Paris. But we didn't do it alone. We ran different positions ourselves, smaller kilometers, but using one stone. So we started with this stone from the Arctic, and all of those people carried this stone to Paris, and then we yoiked it in the hands of Pacific, and it now rests in the Pacific, because that's where the ices of our lands will finally end up drowning, unfortunately. Also good movements we have, what could be created with social media. It's the Tana Blood Diamond. This is an organization, it's a movement that's called Swapan Terror, that is led by Jenny Laiti. She's one of the great leaders within the Arctic, within the Sami communities. And I don't know if you've heard about the Tana Blood Diamond, the diamond mine. Well, it never happened because these people put a lot of force into that mining company. We also try to advocate for, or try to push back Shell and doing all of these small things. But together, if you lead, then you can create a movement. With that, I thank you. We are the nature fighting back.
Thank you so much, Yanni. And our next speaker, Ms. Indu Ibrahim, will be coming up. She's also with the Association for Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad, and she's also a co-chair of our International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change. And this is one of the main indigenous groupings that we work with at the UNFCCC. When we go to those COP, what do you say, the COP is the Conference of the Parties to the UN Convention on Climate Change. And so Hindu's one of the co-chairs, so we're very happy that she's here with us. And thank you very much, Hindu.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Roberto, for this great introduction. And thank you so much for the organizer to invite me here. It's really my first time, but I'm feeling like very familiar with all peoples and what's going on because this is my place. So in my presentation, you will see where I'm coming from. Like Yani present the pastoralist from the ice. But I'm her sister, pastoralist, but from really the dry land in Africa. So, but it's going to be a little bit the same. Just the basic information about the country when I'm come from, Chad. It's a really big country in the middle of Africa, like 3 times size of Germany. But the population, we are very poor. We are not having the exact number of the peoples, but between 12 to 16. Then we all based in the land, what the land giving us. So the agriculture is one of our basic economy and also source for survive. Then for the pollution, if you see, like Chad is polluting 1 time to 20,000 US pollutions. It's really like we doing nothing. So then the good news is Chad ratified the Paris Agreement. So coming from the climate change impact, I have like the concrete example to give you here. We have the impact because we are in the dry land and between the tropical forest that we have the change of the season. So we used to have like the normal western season, 3 season, dry season, rain season, and cold season. But now the cold season is disappear because cold season for us is not snowing, but it's up to like 20 during the night, 10 degree, and we have sweaters and other things. But this is not happening because people are not using like the warm clothes now. So then the season is really very changing. And the rain season changed a lot because we used to have between 6 to 9 months of rain, but now it's like between 2 and 6 months to rain. So then this is impacting the food security and all the life of the people who are living there. So then that's create the desertification and the loss of the biodiversity and then our livestock too. So this picture you are seeing here, this is the Lake Chad. Lake Chad is very famous in Africa because it's the bigger lake that we used to have. In 1963, if you see in this picture, it was 25,000 kilometers of water. Then 40 years later, when you come down to 2001, so the water, it's lose 90% of its dimension. So only 10% left now, and there is not exact like information since 2001. Then we calculate as indigenous peoples around the place, we say it's around 1,500 to 2,000. So all the 95% of the water is disappearing. And around this lake, it's more than 30 million people living around just for them survival. And one of my group are living there too. So you see the consequence in our life. And we said water is really life. Where there is no water, there is no life. So from these consequences, from my peoples who are called Mbororo pastoralists, and we are calling after our red cows with the big horn. So we are nomadic and the semi-nomadic peoples living from around the Lake Chad to the south of Chad. We are in the 5 countries, Chad, Cameroon, Nigeria, Central African Republic. And why this? Because after colonization, they cut our land and then they leave us. Like personally, I have my direct relative. My father brothers is in Central African Republic. My father brothers is in Cameroon. My mother sisters in Cameroon. And like I'm born in Chad. So you see, we have like all our relatives around all those countries and is still living in our lifestyle. So then in this way of life, we develop a lot of traditional knowledge from our, ecosystem observations. When the ecosystem is changing, our knowledge is growing up to get us more adapt. So we develop it a lot there. So here is the kind of the life that we are having. So for the nomadic peoples, we move up to 1,000 kilometers just working after our cows. So we go from the center of Chad to the Congo rivers, and then we come back. It's a cycle that we are doing during the rain season and the dry season through all this part. And we have the some semi-nomadic, not long-term mobility is up to 700 kilometers also during a year. And then we have some who lost our cows who settle in one village but move during the dry season for up to 100 kilometers and come back. So where we have our traditional knowledge and the science knowledge meet, we say that the climate science use the modern knowledge and the forecasting system. But for us, we are just using our information and other factors that we observe, and from this one we create our all indigenous knowledges to get more adapt. So from this one, I give you some of example of our indigenous knowledge to get the weather casting. So when you see this one, we have certain kind of the size of fruits, certain palm that we have. So during the rain seasons, they give the fruit. Then at the end of the rain season, we just take the fruit and we break it down. When we break, we see the liquid inside. If the liquid is abundant, that we know that the tree is predict for the next year, because the tree is not talking and they know how they can ensure them on generation, and that help us to predict the next year if it's going to be good years or not. And we have the certain kinds of laser. When they give babies, they give a lot of babies, and in some years they are not giving a lot of babies because they are not ensuring the next generation, and that help us also to predict if we are going to have like a good rain season next year or not. And then we have also like the direction of the wind. So if the wind is coming from the south to the north, north to the south, if the wind is heavy, like if the wind is dry, if it is hot, and that's help us to say in the next week we are going to have the rain season and the rain is going to be heavy or not. So this observation is helping us to see from from the direction of the wind and also from the sky and the star. And from this one, we are not calculating the good rain season to say, okay, we have like 400 millimeters or 1,000 millimeters of the waters. So for us, the good rain season, it's how the rain is penetrating the soil and giving the vegetation to take growing up and feed the communities, but not the flooding or the drying seasons. So then from this one we said, but how we can put our traditional knowledge and the science knowledge together to get our communities to get more adapt. So we use the 3D participatory mapping. When you see in these two photos that we try to put the communities together and map our land and put our knowledges, and we put the knowledge just some of them in French, in English, in Arabic, like the international languages, but some of our knowledge we just keep that in our mother tongue, and that help us to transmit the knowledge from one generation to another one. And then we use also the super tracker. The super tracker help us to see the monitoring on the vulnerable animals, bears, and all who are disappearing and who are dominating, and that help people to say, okay, we need to get the balance in all our natural resources and equilibrium in our life. So from all those knowledges, how we go and transmit it to the international level, because we know that at the international level they are discussing about our future and where we are not included. So that's where it's come directly our involvement as indigenous peoples to the UNFCCC conventions. And thank you, Roberto. As he said, I really was honored to be the co-chairs from Lima through Paris and to Marrakesh, and known as co-chair of the International Indigenous People Forum on Climate Change. But we are organized in some informal structure. When you see here, then we have the International Indigenous People Forum on the Climate Change. This is really the movement who gather all of us. And inside, we have the Indigenous Peoples Caucus. And Indigenous Peoples Caucus, it's open to all the Indigenous peoples. It's not like need to be how to say, accreditation or something. You are indigenous, you come to the negotiation, you are part of the caucus, and you can attend the caucus. And then through it, we organize to restrict a bit our governance and decision makings. Then we have the Global Steering Committee. So through the Global Steering Committee, in all this, we have 7 regions: Africa, Asia, Arctic, Latin America, Latin American, Caribbean, Pacific, North America, and and Russia in Eastern Europe. So through these 7 regions, we nominate, each region nominate 2 peoples to become member of the Global Steering Committee. And the 2 peoples that it's really nominated by the free, pure, and form of each regions, and when they send the name of those one, we know we form the Global Steering Committee where the decision can be taken. And then we have the co-chairs where English and Spanish, because we know that our brothers from Latin America are many, and the negotiation is helping in English, but it's not really a characteristic for us because our mother tongues are different from the UN languages. Then like myself, I'm really French and Arabic speakers, but I'm trying with English. Hope that you are understanding what I'm saying. So then from the Global Steering Committee, we have like a technical team. And thank you so much to Kim, who is always from the beginning one of our technical team members who are helping us to put like all the term and all the negotiation and decrypting what's going on there. And then from this one, we have the thematic team. Into the thematic team, as you know, on the climate change, we have the adaptation, the mitigation, we have SABSTA, SBI, APA, and others. So all the thematic negotiation, we nominate someone who lead the group, and then the other join the group. And then we have our daily strategic meeting in each COP from 9 to 10, where we said, okay, SABSTA group, today you have A, B, C, D to follow, and SBI group and APA group, then people follow the negotiation, then they come back to give us the feedback the next day, and then we put our strategy in going during the 2 or 3 weeks of the negotiations. And then we have our focal point to the UNFCCC, who is the liaison officer who can be in contact with the Secretariat and give us the information if the Secretariat have any information to share with the observer organizations. And then we go through him to send back our informations. So then the 7 regions are there. So everybody in the region, not only the Global Steering Committee, feed the information back to all the group in the top, and that we have like the consultation of all the regions and all the communities from the down to the bottom up. So from this one, when we organize in Paris, like what we get at outcome, in Paris we had like the 7 regions consultations when they did also some national consultations. And we work into the INDCs, and as you know, the countries have them presenting of their INDCs. And when we go back, we see how many of them put indigenous peoples, just our term, into the indices. There is 177 and NDC proposed, I guess, so from them there is only 19 countries who have the reference of indigenous peoples. So there is a lot of work to do on it. But the outcome of the Paris Agreement, as Andrea already said that, so we have into the Paris Agreement, into the preambles when there is recognition of indigenous people rights. Then we have the Article 7.5 where they recognize the indigenous people's knowledge to adaptation to the climate change. And into the decisions, we have the participation situation of indigenous peoples and the rights of indigenous peoples, but the most important is the para 135, where the establishment of the indigenous peoples knowledge platform. And this one have been discussed during the COP22 in Morocco, where was the very historical change of the UNFCCC negotiations never happened. Because as indigenous people, we said, you cannot talk about us, for us, and without us. We have to be in the table with you, even if the government who can negotiate, but we have to talk ourselves. And then we win on it because we sit in the table with them and we negotiate, and some countries give us them flag to talk on this. And what we get here, I'm not going to read it, but what we get it there to come to Bonn. So Bonn will be from 8 to 18 May 2017, and the COP will be in November also this year. So what we get there, we get the submission where countries and indigenous peoples organizations make all the submissions for the knowledge platform to a structure. Like we need the structure, we need the purpose, we need the content to see how we are going to work on it. And then by May, many people now make the submission. And during May negotiation, we get 2 days of official negotiation, the 16 May from 10 to 1, and the 17 May from 1 to 18, where indigenous peoples will sit with the state and negotiate this one. And then we are going to co-moderate the session with the SABSTA co-chair, where our co-moderator is Grace from Tepteba from Philippines, that we nominate through our clear and transparent procedures there. So then after these 2 days, we will have the report of the consultation who will be submitted to the COP23 in November. And when they submit this one, we ask to have like any special agenda item under the SABSTA 47 to get this through the official negotiation as indigenous peoples. So that was really the outcome and the result from the ground, and we transfer this one at the international level. And thanks to all of you here and all the groups who are working to make the indigenous peoples' knowledge and rights happening, because this is our big fight for the next coming years as peoples and as population to save our world. And thank you very much.
Thank you once again, Hindu. And I hope some of you will take note of those dates for the next upcoming COP and really review what's coming up online about this new Indigenous Traditional Knowledge Platform. It's actually Indigenous and local communities knowledge platform. And there's been some regional meetings about that, gathering some information, what Indigenous peoples want to see. And so that's going to move forward, and we'll be able to take some more questions on that afterwards. Right now, we want to introduce Ms. Berenice Sanchez, who also works with the International Indian Treaty Council in our Indigenous Network for Food Sovereignty in Mexico. And Berenice is going to give her presentation in Spanish, but we have a translator who will be doing a consecutive translation. So she'll speak a little bit, then the translation will come, and then she'll continue. Right? Is that the way it's going to be? Or?
We were just talking that if we do it simultaneous, then she'll be able to speak more. So it's up to you all what you think. But
How will they get? Does everybody have the headphones? Or?
no, I'll just be speaking in the microphone so people will hear her as much.
Okay.
She was saying that way she could talk more.
Yeah, whatever way you want to do it, you can.
Just to move the slides forward, just press this button there. Vamos a ver adelante si se botón aquí.
Hashibuhata, Hashibuhana, Teshkihasto. Mi nombre es Berenice Sánchez. Yo soy indígena Náhuatl Otomí de México y agradezco a los guardianes de este lugar el poder estar aquí.
My name is Berenice Sanchez. I'm an indigenous person who's Náhuatl Otomí from Mexico, and I'm grateful to the guardians of this place for allowing me to be here. And now we're going to do it simultaneously.
Yo me estaba preguntando
I was asking
qué era
myself,
Rising Voices,
what was Rising Voices?
y trataba de entender
And I was trying to
qué es
understand
lo que tenía que
what
decir
I should say in this place
que fuera importante
that would be important
y que fuera también
and that would also be useful
y verdadero.
and truthful.
Y hablaba con Roberto
And I was
esta
speaking
mañana
with Roberto this morning,
y él me decía,
and he was saying to me
tú tienes que
that
enlazar cómo
you
estás
have to
trabajando
link
en el nivel local
how you're working on the local
y
level,
cómo
and
se puede hacer el vínculo
how
con el ámbito
you
internacional.
can make the connection with the international sphere.
Y entonces,
And so,
solamente quisiera decir
at the
que
beginning, I was thinking about talking about
en este ámbito del
that
cambio
in this
climático
time of climate change,
me he sentido
I
en la
felt
línea del fuego,
aligned with the fire,
defendiendo mi territorio,
defending my
el
lands,
bosque
defending the forest,
y pensando sobre todo en las
and
futuras generaciones,
especially thinking more than anything of
pero
future
a quien tengo
generations,
más cerca,
so that I might
una generación futura,
have that future
Esa mi hija,
generation. This is my
que
daughter,
ahora ya tiene 12 años,
who now is 12 years old,
pero cuando tenía esa edad,
but when she was that age,
yo regresé
I
a mi pueblo,
returned to my
después de haber
community
estado estudiando
after
fuera de mi
having been
comunidad
studying outside of my
durante
community for
más o menos
more or
10
less
años.
10 years.
Yo salí desde que tenía 14
I
años de
left
edad
when I was 14,
y regresé
and I
cuando
returned
tenía como 26,
when I was
27
about
años.
26, 27 years old.
Y lo que me hizo regresar
And what made me
a mi
return to
territorio,
my land
después de estar tanto
after
tiempo
having
fuera,
been outside for so long
fue que en
was
ese
that
lugar donde yo
in that
empecé a
place
vivir,
where I began living,
no había hongos.
there were no mushrooms.
Nosotros como pueblo tenemos una
We as a
conexión
people have
muy
a
profunda
very
con este alimento
profound
tradicional.
connection with that traditional
Tenemos un
food.
sistema de
We have
clasificación
a system of
que
classification
identifica cada hongo.
that identifies each
Sabemos a
mushroom.
dónde acudir
We know where we need
para
to go
cosecharlos.
to
No
harvest
tenemos que
them.
andarlos
We don't
buscando
have
en
to
todo el
be
bosque,
searching for them throughout the forest,
sino que hay
but
sitios en
rather
donde
there are
ellos
certain
crecen
places where they
y
grow,
condiciones también
and
bajo
also
las cuales ellos se
conditions under
desarrollan.
which they develop.
Y
And
fue mi abuela
it was my grandmother
quien me enseñó
who
a
taught
andar
me
en el bosque
how to be in the forest, how to walk in the forest,
y a recoger los
and how
hongos.
to pick the mushrooms.
Entonces yo me
And so
preguntaba,
I was asking
¿qué va a hacer
myself,
de mi hija
what's
si
going to
ella
happen
no
to my
sabe
daughter if she doesn't go
caminar en el
out and she
bosque?
doesn't know how to learn
Si
to
ella
walk in
no
the forest,
puede
if she can't
comer estos hongos y
eat
no los
those
puede
mushrooms, if she
identificar?
can't identify them?
¿Qué va a hacer de ella?
What's gonna happen to her?
Y entonces eso
And
fue lo que
so
me
that
hizo
was what
volver.
made me go back.
Y me encontré
And I found
en que mi territorio ya no
myself in
olía
that
igual.
my territory
que
didn't
cuando yo
smell
salí
the
de
same
él.
way as when I left it, my lands.
El aire
The air
era pestilente.
was very,
Había
it smelled
algo en el
horrible. There
ambiente
was
que yo no
something in the
sabía qué era.
environment that I didn't know what it was.
Y entonces yo salía
And
al
so
jardín y
I went out to the garden
olía y
and I
era un
smelled
olor a
it, and
podrido.
there was a
Iba a
smell
la
of
casa
something
de mis
rotten.
padres
I went
y
to
era
my
el mismo
parents'
aroma.
home and it was the same smell.
Y me preguntaba qué
And I
sucedía. La
asked
gente
myself,
ya
what
no
was
lo
happening?
notaba.
Did people not notice? The people weren't noticing
Y
it.
me di cuenta de
And I
que
realized that
después de un tiempo que yo
after
estuve preguntando,
some time that I'd been
alguien me
asking
dijo,
this, someone
es
said
el
to me,
basurero,
oh,
es
that's the
biosistemas.
garbage dump. It's
¿Cómo
the
que es un basurero?
system.
¿Cómo
I
que
said,
es
what is it? A
biosistemas?
dump? What is a
¿Qué es
biosystem
eso?
dump? What is that?
Están por
Oh,
allá haciendo
it's over
composta,
there.
es una
They're making
empresa.
compost. It's a business. It's an
Y
industry.
el nombre de esa empresa
And the
era
name of that
Biosistemas
business was
Sustentables.
Sustainable
Están
Biosystems.
recibiendo bonos de
And
carbono,
they're receiving
haciendo una
carbon
composta verde
waste. They're making supposedly a
en la
green
cual
compost
llega a haber
which-
fetos de bebés,
in which there might
animales
be
muertos,
dead animals, fetuses of dead babies,
residuos de hospitales
waste from
que
hospitals
estaban enfermando a la gente.
that was making people sick.
Pero en mi pueblo la
But
gente
in
ya
my
no se daba
village,
cuenta del
people
olor del aire.
hadn't realized about the smell of the air. We were very
Pensando en la
disconnected,
autonomía y
thinking
pensando en
about
que nuestro
autonomy,
territorio
thinking
no lo
that
toca el gobierno,
the government wasn't
pero
involved in our
dejando
lands, but
que
they were
en la
allowing
comunidad de al lado.
that the nearby
implementaran
community
ese
was
proyecto.
implementing this project.
Y entonces
And so
esa era una primera
that was
amenaza.
the first threat.
Esa comunidad estaba arriba
That community
y mi
is
comunidad
higher than us, and my
está en la
community
montaña, en
is
la parte baja.
in the mountain, but in the lower areas.
Ese es un plano
This
que
is-
también es colonial.
Also, a map that is colonial.
Tampoco representa en
It
sí
doesn't
lo que es el
represent
territorio de mi pueblo.
my people's territory
Sin
as such,
embargo,
but nevertheless,
quiero decir que ahí
I want to
somos
let you
11
know that we are
comunidades.
11 communities
Somos
there.
más o menos 15,000
We're more or less
habitantes.
15,000 inhabitants.
Nuestra identidad
Our
fundamentalmente está
fundamental
basada
identity is based
en el principio de la autonomía.
in the principle of
Somos
autonomy.
un pueblo
We are a
en el
people
cual nos empezó
in
a
which
decir que somos
we
autónomos
began
a
to
partir
call
del
ourselves
zapatismo, por ejemplo.
autonomous after
En
the time
México
of
muchos
Zapata. In
pueblos
Mexico,
dicen
many of the peoples
autonomía, pero
use the
como
word
algo que
autonomy, but
surge
it's something that
como
arose
concepto a partir de
as a concept
1994
starting
con
from
el
1994
STLN.
when the SST,
En mi
the
pueblo,
Free
la
Trade
gente
Agreement.
más
In
anciana
my people, the
habla de
eldest
autonomía y
people
de
speak of
soberanía sobre
autonomy
nuestra tierra
and
y sobre nuestro
sovereignty about
territorio.
our lands, over our
Y
lands.
tenemos historias
And we have
acerca
stories,
de la
history
exención de impuestos a la corona
from
española.
when the Spanish crown
Desde
began to impose taxes
1740
from
no le tuvimos que pagar nada en
1770.
absoluto a la corona
We
española.
we didn't have to pay anything
Y
to the Spanish
actualmente
crown,
no le
and
tenemos que
currently
pagar
we
nada
don't
ni
have to
pedir
pay
permiso al
anything,
gobierno,
nor do we have to ask the government
ni al
permission.
municipal, ni al estatal, ni
We
al
don't have to
federal.
ask the municipal government, the state government, or the federal government for absolutely anything.
Pero si el gobierno
But if
quiere
the
entrar a
government
nuestras tierras,
wants to bring something
tiene
to
que
our
pedirnos
land, they have to
permiso a
ask
nosotros.
permission of us.
Y tenemos un territorio
And
muy
we
bien
have
delimitado.
a very well
Nuestros
defined
linderos
land
nos
base.
ubican perfectamente
We
las
know
otras
exactly
comunidades
where
y no tenemos
all the
conflicto de
communities are. We have
territorio.
no territorial conflicts because
Sabe
all the communities know where the
perfectamente
limits are. We
el
know
gobierno
the government
cuando está
knows
entrando en el
when they are
territorio
coming
de
into
Magu.
the Magu land.
Magu es
Magu
una palabra
is a word
que deriva de
that comes from
una despedida que se hacía
a
en el
farewell
idioma
that we would use in
nativo.
our indigenous
Maga,
language,
maga,
maga, magangu,
que quiere decir
which
vámonos,
means
vámonos,
let's go,
vámonos a
let's
casa,
go, let's go home,
después de trabajar en el
after
centro
having
del
been
municipio.
working in the municipal center.
Y en esta que es nuestra
And in
casa,
this, which is our home,
tenemos ese territorio
we
bien
have
delimitado,
this
tenemos
land that is very well
cultura,
defined, we have
tenemos
culture, we have
tenemos usos y
traditions,
costumbres,
we have
un
uses and
sistema propio de
customs,
tenencia
we
de
have
la
our
tierra,
own way of land holding,
en el cual
in
no
which
tenemos que hacer
we
nada
don't
con
have
una
to
escritura
do
del
anything
gobierno,
with a
por
written
ejemplo.
deed from the government, for
Nosotros
example.
mismos hacemos
We
nuestros
ourselves
arreglos
make our
para
own
poder
rules
heredar, para poder
to be able
transmitir la
to
tierra.
inherit or transmit land.
Y también las mujeres
And also the women,
tenemos derecho sobre las
we
tierras.
have the
Nuestros
right to land. Our
padres nos
parents
heredan lo mismo a nosotras
bequeath
como
the same to
mujeres
us
que a
as
los
women,
hombres,
same
lo cual no sucede
women and
en
men.
muchas comunidades
And that
en
doesn't
México.
always happen in a lot of the communities in
Tenemos
Mexico.
un
We
sistema
have
propio de agua
our
potable
own
y de
system
riego
of
para
potable
nuestros
water and
cultivos
irrigation water
tradicionales.
for our traditional
Y en
crops.
este mapa
And in this map,
aparece en
you
toda
can
esa
see
franja
in all of
verde
this
que ven arriba,
green zone that you see
eso
above,
es nuestro sistema
that's
de agua
our
de riego
system
para
of
nuestras
irrigation
parcelas.
water for our land parcels, our land.
Tenemos un sistema propio de administración
We have
de
our own
justicia.
way of administration of justice,
Y teníamos
our
toda esta
justice systems.
certeza de
And we have
estar
the
seguros
certainty
de
of
nuestro
being
propio
very
territorio, hablando
secure
de
in our
nuestra
own land,
autonomía.
speaking about our own
Cuando
autonomy.
en 2012
But in 2012,
gente desconocida
unknown
comienza a talar
people
una parte de
began
nuestro
to cut
territorio.
down part of our
No sabíamos
territory.
quiénes
We didn't
eran.
know who they were.
Lo único que sabíamos
The only
es
thing
que
that
no
we
era
knew
gente
was
del
that they
pueblo.
weren't people from the community.
No sabíamos qué hacían
We didn't
ahí.
know what they were doing
Lo
there.
único que nos dábamos
The only
cuenta es
thing
que
that we
estaban
were
destruyendo
aware of is that they were destroying
bosque donde
our
nosotros
forests where
íbamos a
we
juntar nuestros
would go
hongos, donde
to pick
nosotros
our mushrooms, where
acudíamos
we would
por
go
nuestras medicinas
for our traditional
tradicionales,
medicines,
donde
where
nosotros vamos a hacer
we would
faenas,
go to
trabajo
where we would do
comunitario,
communal
cuidar nuestra
work
agua
to
de
take
riego.
care of our irrigation water.
Y entonces
And
nos
so
dimos cuenta de que
we
había
realized that there
unas
was
lonas que
some
anunciaban
areas
un aprovechamiento forestal sustentable
they were not doing sustainable forestry practices
por cambio de uso de suelo.
because there had been a change in the zoning.
Y anunciaba ahí como una
And they had
autorización
signs
por
there
parte
saying
de la
that they were
Secretaría del Medio
authorized
Ambiente.
by the Secretary of the Environment,
Y
the
detrás de
federal
todo este
secretary, and
supuesto
all of that
aprovechamiento forestal
supposedly
sustentable
taking advantage of
por
a
cambio de
sustainable
uso
use
de
of the
suelo,
forest because of a zoning
se
change.
escondía un proyecto
That hid a project
de desarrollo inmobiliario
of home
que
building
pretende la construcción de 11,000
that was-
viviendas. 11,000
They
viviendas.
were hoping to build 11,000 homes.
Y en ese mapa
And
que está
in this
medio
map that's in the center,
está ubicada esa área.
that is where that area
Es
is
un
located.
área
It's
de
an
uso
area
comunitario.
of communal
No le
use.
pertenece a nadie.
It doesn't
no
belong to
tiene escritura,
anybody. There's no
porque
deed.
no hay ningún dueño.
There's no title because there's no
Es
single
una zona
owner.
que le
It's an
pertenece a la
area
comunidad
that
en su
belongs to
conjunto.
the community
Y ahí
altogether.
la gente acude
And
por
there the people go
medicinas,
for
por
medicines,
hongos,
for
por
mushrooms,
leña,
for
pero
firewood,
no
but
talar los
not to
árboles.
cut the trees down.
Podemos ir a cuidar
We can go
borregos,
to take care of sheep,
Podemos ir de
We
día de
can
campo si queremos.
go out for a day in the countryside if we want. No one asks us for any authorization to go, and we can go in. Anyone who, even if they're not from the community, can enter there, but not to destroy.
Entonces, en
And
ese
so
momento
at
vimos
that
cómo
moment,
se
we
estaba
saw
violentando nuestro
how
derecho
they
de
were
autonomía.
violating our rights to autonomy.
Y en nuestras
And
primeras
in our
asambleas
first assemblies,
en las que
in which
estuvimos
we were
abordando esta problemática,
covering this problem,
nosotros inicialmente lo
we,
que
at the
decidimos
beginning, what we decided
fue no pedirle
was
al
to
gobierno que
not
nos
ask
consultara,
the government to consult us,
porque eso era lo que
because
nos preguntaban
that
en
was
las
what
instancias de gobierno.
they were
Bueno,
asking
¿ustedes
us in
quieren
government
ser
agencies. Would say, well, do you
consultados?
want to be
¿Quieren que les hagamos
consulted? Do you
una
want us
consulta?
to consult all of you?
Y dijimos,
And we
no,
were saying, no,
nosotros no te pedimos
we
que te fueras a meter a
didn't
nuestro
ask you
territorio.
to come into, to come into our
diciendo que
territory.
tienes
We're
que
saying that
revocar
you have to
y
revoke
que tienes
this,
que echar
and that
abajo
you have to
cualquier permiso que hayas
get rid of
dado sobre
any
nuestro
permit that
territorio.
you've given within our territory.
Eso fue lo que nosotros
That's
exigimos.
what we demanded,
Cancelen y
to,
revoquen.
to cancel
cualquier
and revoke
permiso.
any permit that had been given.
Hubo gente que
There were
quería
people who wanted to
subir a esta zona de nuestro territorio
come into our territory
armados con machetes,
armed with
con
machetes,
palas, con picos,
with
gente de la
sticks, with
comunidad,
axes, people from the community,
para enfrentar a,
in order to
a los
confront
talamontes.
those loggers.
Y en esos momentos,
And at that
yo
time,
estaba
at that
en el
moment,
micrófono
I was at the
informando
microphone.
del proyecto y
I was
escuchando cómo
talking
la
about
gente le
the
quería
project
ir a
and
golpear a quienes
saying
estaban
that people
talando.
wanted to go and beat the people who were cutting the trees down.
Y me tocó ser a
And
mí
it was up to me
a la que
to,
tuvo que decir,
I had to say,
aquí lo más
here,
importante que hay
the
que
most
conservar es
important
nuestras
thing that we
propias
have to
vidas.
conserve
Estamos
is
en
our
México,
own lives. We're in Mexico,
en donde se criminaliza,
where
se reprime a la gente,
people are
se
criminalized, they're
desaparece
repressed,
sin
people are
ningún
disappeared
problema.
without
Ese
any
es el
problems.
contexto en el
This
que
is the
estamos.
context in which we
Lo
are.
más importante
The
que
most
tenemos que
important thing that
conservar
we
es
have to
nuestra propia
preserve
vida
is our own
para
lives
pelear por la
in
vida
order
de
to be
la
able to
tierra.
fight for the life of the land.
Y tuve que parar
And I had to
a la
stop
gente, tuve que
the people.
detenerlos para
I
que
had
no
to hold them back
acudieran
so that they
a golpear a
wouldn't
los
go
demás,
to
que
beat up
también era
the
gente
rest.
indígena.
They were also indigenous people.
Y entonces nos damos
And so
cuenta
we
cómo son
realized
indígenas
how
los
they
que
were
terminan
indigenous people,
devastando las tierras de
those
otros
who
indígenas.
end up destroying the lands of other indigenous
En medio de
peoples.
todo esto,
In the midst of all of
el
this,
gobierno nos
the
decía,
government said to
la
us,
empresa ha pagado
the
3
company
millones
has
de
paid
pesos
3 million
Son como
pesos,
3,000
which is like
dólares.
$3,000
como un permiso
for a
de
permit
compensación ambiental.
of environmental compensation.
significa esto?
What did this
Preguntamos.
mean, we asked.
Ah, pues es que
Oh,
como
well,
su
it's
bosque
that
no sirve,
since your forest is
como en su
not good for
bosque las
anything,
semillas
since
de
in
los
your
árboles no son capaces
the
de
the seeds
germinar,
there
ya ha
aren't
habido
able to
estudios
germinate. There's been
científicos que
scientific
determinan
studies
eso.
that have decided this.
Y en esos
So,
estudios científicos
in those
de
scientific
manifestación
studies
ambiental,
that show the
se-
environmental impact,
se establece que
they
en 10
established
años
that
ese
in
bosque ya
10
no va a
years this
existir.
forest is not going to exist anymore.
Entonces, la
And so,
utilidad
the usefulness,
más rentable
the most
es convertir
profitable
ese
use is to
bosque
convert that forest,
decadente,
which
ese
is
bosque enfermo,
this
plagado,
sick forest that
bello
has plagues,
fraccionamiento
into a very
residencial.
beautiful residential subdivision.
y nosotros dijimos,
And we said,
¿quieren ustedes que les
do you all
comprobemos que
want
nuestras
us to
semillas
prove
sí
that our
germinan?
seeds do germinate?
¿O quieren
Or do you want to prove it yourselves?
Y vimos cómo nuestros
And we
árboles
saw
caían
how
uno
our
a uno.
trees were falling one by
En
one.
tan solo 15 días
Just in 15 days,
perdimos 15 hectáreas
we
de
lost
bosque.
15 hectares of forest.
Y esto no es más
And
que un
this
ejemplo de
is just
red,
one example of the network
del mecanismo de
of
Naciones
the
Unidas
the
para
mechanism of the United States to
supuestamente
supposedly
reducir la
reduce
deforestación.
deforestation and devastation.
Pero no es otra cosa
But
más que
it's
permisos
just only
para
another
destruir,
system of permits to destroy,
para
red,
apropiarse
to
de lo que
take
a nadie le
over
pertenece.
what belongs to no one.
Con
With this,
estos 3 millones de
these
pesos
3 million pesos,
estaban pagando
they will be
la
paying
tala
for the cutting
de 200
of
hectáreas de bosque.
200 hectares of
Y
forest.
ese dinero iba a
And
ir a
that money
parar
was
al Fondo
going to
Forestal Mexicano
go to the Mexican Forestry
para que el
Fund,
Fondo
so
Forestal
that
Mexicano
the Mexican Forestry
le diera ese
Fund
dinero
would
o
give
parte
that
de ese
money or
dinero,
part of
porque
that
hay mucha
money,
corrupción en
because there's a
México,
lot of corruption in Mexico,
a otra comunidad
to another
indígena
indigenous community
para supuestamente
to
reforestar.
supposedly reforest.
Genial, ¿no?
Really nice, huh?
Talas un bosque
You'd cut down a forest,
de 500 años o más
500 years old or
y
more,
vas y plantas
and you go and you
arbolitos de
plant
eucalipto
some eucalyptus trees.
o de cualquier
or
otro árbol,
some other kind of tree,
diciéndole a la otra
saying
comunidad
to the other
que
community
es su pago por
that
servicios
this is
ambientales,
the payment for environmental
que va a
services,
haber bonos de
that
carbono.
there will be carbon benefits.
Y esa comunidad lo recibe
And that community is going to be very happy to receive that without realizing
que en unos años
that in a few years
no van a tener permiso
they're
de
not going to have the ability to go and
nada,
pick anything,
que están concesionando
that
en ese momento
they're,
sus
at that moment they're
tierras
giving
a
away their
manos
lands
privadas,
into
que es otra
private
forma de
hands, which is
colonialismo,
another form of colonialism.
y que encima de todo
And
están
that on top
afectando
of all of
mi
that, it's
territorio, mi
affecting
futuro,
my
mi
land,
gente,
my future, my people,
y que están afectando
and
en
it's
sí
affecting
el futuro de todo
the
el planeta.
future of the entire planet.
Pero este asunto de
But
red es bien
this topic
complicado.
of red is very complicated.
A mí me tocó escuchar a
I had to
comunidades
listen to
indígenas
indigenous
de Estados
communities
Unidos
from the United
diciendo,
States that were saying,
estoy en un territorio donde
I'm in a
hay minería
land
de carbono,
where there's the carbon
donde
mining,
hay
or
una
coal mining,
petrolera,
where there's carbon
y
mining,
los
coal
fondos
mining,
que
where
están
there's,
utilizando
and
pueblos
oil
indígenas
companies, they're using
en
indigenous
Brasil,
funds
pueblos
in Brazil,
indígenas en Ecuador, pueblos
indigenous
indígenas
peoples
en
in
México,
Ecuador, in
en
Mexico,
Chiapas, por ejemplo,
in
que
Chiapas,
fue
for example,
rechazado este mecanismo,
which rejected this mechanism
provienen de la destrucción de mi
because it's
territorio.
coming from the destruction of my
¿Qué
territory.
hacemos ahí?
And so what do we do there?
Somos indígenas
We are indigenous peoples
peleándonos
fighting among
entre nosotros
ourselves,
mismos,
fighting among
sin
ourselves
siquiera verlo.
without even seeing that.
Y entonces nosotros,
And so we,
después de estar exigiendo
after
que
having been
cancelaran esos
demanding
permisos,
that they cancel
nos
those
dimos cuenta
permits,
que el
we
Estado no lo
realized
quería hacer,
that the state
que ya
didn't
había
want to do
concedido
it, that
un
they had
montón de
already
autorizaciones
gotten a whole
a nuestras
lot of
espaldas.
authorization behind our
La primera
backs.
forma en
The
la que
first
nosotros nos
way
dimos cuenta
in which
de
we
todo esto
realized about
fue
this
así.
was this.
Cuando escuchamos las
When we
motosierras,
heard the
cuando
chainsaws,
vimos a las
when we
águilas que estaban
saw
bajando
the
hacia
eagles
nuestro
that were
pueblo,
coming
porque ya
down
no
into our
tenían
village
paz
because
ahí.
they had no space anymore there.
Y entonces en las
And
asambleas
so
generales
in
la
the
gente
general
dijo, si el
assemblies, the
Estado
people
no
were
puede
saying, if the
resolver
state
esto,
doesn't want to solve this
entonces
problem,
nosotros
then
mismos vamos
we
a construir
ourselves
las soluciones
are going
a
to
través de
create
nuestros
our
propios
solutions
procedimientos.
based on our own procedures.
¿Cómo?
How?
Empoderándonos más aún en
Empowering
las asambleas.
ourselves
Pero
even more in
ante
our
esto,
assemblies, but
el
in the face
gobierno
of this,
decidió
the
tomar
government
nuestras
decided
propias
to
formar grupos de choque, criminalizarnos,
to criminalize us
y
and to
rompiendo
have
el
shock
tejido social de
forces
nuestro pueblo,
and to
enfrentando a la gente
confront the
del pueblo con
people
la
of
gente
the
del pueblo.
confront the people of the village with
medio
other
de
people from the
eso,
village. In the midst of all of this,
Nos
we
dimos cuenta de que era
realized
necesario tomar
that we
también
needed to also
los espacios en
take
donde
the
se configuran las
spaces
decisiones.
in which decisions were being
Tuvimos
made.
que ser representantes
We had
de
to be
nuestro pueblo.
representatives
A
of our
nuestra corta
people
edad,
at our young
gente del
age,
pueblo
and
que decía,
for the people
"Vamos
in
a
the village
darles
that
un
were
par de
saying, well,
balazos a esos mocosos."
we're going to shoot these guys, these
Y si
little
en esos
snotty-nosed guys.
momentos
And at that moment,
estoy aquí,
if I'm here,
ha sido porque logramos
it's been because
utilizar los
we were
mecanismos
able to
internacionales.
utilize international mechanisms.
Hubo una asamblea general
There
en
was
la
a
que el
general
gobierno
assembly
nos
in
mandó
which the
granaderos,
government
nos mandó
sent
policías.
us shock
Y en
SWAT
esa asamblea
troops
hubo
and police,
gente
and in
del
that
pueblo
assembly
que
there were people
después
from the
de
village
golpearme,
who were
a mí y
after
a mi esposo, que
beating
también
up
era
myself and my
representante del
husband,
pueblo,
who was also a representative of
nos
the village.
entregaron a los granaderos.
They turned us over to the SWAT team.
Yo escuché la orden de
I
llévense a
heard
las
the
camionetas.
order of take them to the trucks.
En ese momento
And at that
sabía
moment, I
que mi
knew
vida
that my life
pendía de un hilo.
just was hanging by a
Pero fueron
thread.
las mujeres
But it was the women,
las que peleándose con
those
los
who were
granaderos
fighting with
lograron
the
arrebatarme
police.
de sus
They were
brazos
able to pull me away
y
from
ponerme
them
a salvo.
and save me.
Y en medio de todo
And in the
esto,
midst of all of
nosotros
this,
no esperamos
we
a
weren't
agotar las instancias
we
nacionales,
weren't
las
waiting to
instancias
go to
locales, porque el
international
gobierno siempre
agencies or
dice
national
eso.
agencies because people always
Ya
say that, oh,
visitaste a
did
tu
you go
autoridad
to
local?
your local authority?
Si no lo has hecho,
If you
regrésate,
haven't
porque
done
ahí
that, go
está la
back there
solución.
because that's where the solution is.
Y entonces,
And so
nosotros lo que hicimos a
what we
través del Consejo
did
de Tratados
through
Indios
the International Indian
desde el
Treaty
primer
Council was
momento
from the first moment
hacer una comunicación con el
we
relator de Naciones
communicated
Unidas sobre
with
los
the
derechos de
raconteur
los
from the
pueblos
United
indígenas.
Nations for Indigenous Affairs.
Paralelamente estuvimos
At
participando
the
en
same
el
time, we
foro
were also
permanente para las
participating in the
cuestiones
permanent
indígenas,
forum
y en la
on indigenous
Convención de Cambio
questions
Climático,
and for climate change,
en donde yo sé que
in
este
which
tema
I know
de,
that this
de
topic
red
of
sigue
red
siendo un tema complicado.
continues
Pero
to be a
yo
very
estoy del lado de la
complicated topic, but
destrucción. Yo estoy del lado de la destrucción.
but I'm on the side of the destruction.
Entonces,
And so
estoy aquí para
I'm here
decir que,
to tell
que
you
lo que se decida en el
that
nivel
what was
internacional
decided on the international
tiene su
level
impacto en el
also
ámbito
has
local.
its effect on the national,
Y en
and the
el ámbito
national
local
level,
es a
and the
donde
local
nos
level.
toca
And on the
estar en las trincheras.
local level is where we are in the
Y esas
trenches.
trincheras
And those
implican
trenches imply
entregar nuestros territorios.
turning over our
No hay que
territories.
abandonarlas. dejarlas.
We cannot abandon them.
Entonces nosotros
And
hemos
so
tenido que
we've
hacer esto
had to do this
recuperar nuestros
We've
caminos
had
de
to
vida,
recover our own ways of life,
nombrando también esta zona como una
naming
zona de
this
soberanía
area
alimentaria
as an area of food
y
sovereignty
un santuario de flora y
and
fauna.
also a sanctuary for flora
Ahí
and
corre
fauna.
nuestra agua.
This is where our water flows.
Logramos
We were able
reforestar
to
nosotros mismos,
reforest we
porque
ourselves
pedimos árboles
because we
y
asked
no
for
nos dieron,
trees and they didn't
porque
give them to
teníamos
us
que acreditar la propiedad.
because we had to accredit the property,
Cuando
the
la
ownership.
inmobiliaria que
When
pretende instalarse ahí no conoce ni siquiera los linderos de
when
ese territorio.
the subdivision that they wanted to build didn't even recognize the
Pero
limits
éramos
of that
nosotros
land,
los que
but
tenían que
we were
acreditar
the
la
ones
propiedad.
that we had to accredit and prove our ownership of the
Entonces
property. And
dijimos,
so
bueno,
we said, well,
nosotros mismos
okay,
sembramos.
we're going to plant ourselves.
Nosotros mismos sabemos
We
dónde están
ourselves
los
know
árboles
where the
pequeños,
trees, the small
porque hay
trees are,
semilleros en el
because
mismo bosque.
there are also places where the seeds are in that same
Incentivamos
forest.
la
And we
participación de los jóvenes, de los
incentivized
niños,
the participation of
pero
children
de
and
las
youth
personas mayores
and
también,
also of
porque se había
elders,
roto
because
ese
we knew,
vínculo.
because that link
La
had been
tercera
broken.
generación,
The
que son
older
nuestros padres, por
generation, who are
ejemplo,
our parents, for example,
no nos vincularon con
they
nuestros
didn't
abuelos,
connect us with our
y
grandparents,
menos aún con
and
los
much less
bisnietos.
to
Entonces
the
nosotros teníamos
great-grandchildren.
que
So
volver a
we
unir.
had to once again unite.
El idioma era algo
The
que se había
language
perdido,
was something that had been
y
lost,
sin embargo ahora
but nevertheless now
vamos recuperándolo.
we are recovering it.
Esta es la forma
This is
tradicional
the
en la que se
traditional
mide un
way
terreno,
in
con
which
una cinta.
you come, you measure a land just with a tape.
Entonces decidimos hacer
And
la
so we
escritura
decided
de
to
este
make the
predio
deed
a favor
of
de
this
todo el
land
pueblo.
as something that belonged to the entire
Y la gente
village.
nos decía,
And the
"Pero
people
¿cómo
said
van
to
a
us, but
medir
how are you going to
184
measure
hectáreas
180
con esa cinta?"
hectares with that tape?
Pues estirándola de
Well,
50 en
stretching
50
it
metros.
50 meters, 50 meters,
No hay
50
de otra.
meters. There's no other way.
Y con esto
And
les
with
doy
this,
las gracias.
I thank you all.
Poki de Maja. Continuaremos resguardando
We
y
shall
transmitiendo
continue
nuestras ceremonias
guarding and
tradicionales,
transmitting our traditional ceremonies,
protegiendo nuestro territorio que
protecting
es sagrado,
our land, which is sacred,
y cuidando del
and
futuro
taking
de
care
quienes
of the
aún no
future.
posan sus pies sobre la faz de la tierra.
that those who have not yet placed their feet on the face of the earth.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Berenice. And I'm sure you all realize now that these are just some very powerful women that we have here, and you'll be able to interact more with them when we have the breakout sessions. But we have about 10 minutes for questions. So if folks have questions, please use the microphones. Remember, Berenice is also getting translated, so just try to speak clearly and slowly and loudly using the microphone. Should help. So are there any questions? Did you have a question? No? Yeah. Questions, comments? If not, you did a great job. Let's give him a hand again. Oh, you have one? Oh, there you go. Okay, great.
Thank you. That was all very powerful stories that you shared. And I'm asking you, as someone who's doing this work, navigating this work in my community, where do you find that capacity to face such unique challenges, doing this work within your own community when the people, you know, that you come back to are your relatives? And I don't know if you feel like you have such a responsibility to do such a good job and to be accountable at so many levels as scientists and then within your own community. And you know, I'm working on finding support to do this work, but I wonder if each of you can speak to where you find that support first and foremost to keep doing this.
Yes, it's working?
Yep.
It's working? Yeah. I mean,
Just speak closer to it.
yeah, for me, for personally, you know, my peoples are depending from this land and what the land are giving us. We are pastoralists. And I get the chance, maybe we are just 3 or 4 who get the chance to go to school. And most of them are not they went to school, but they are not going back to the community because they have to do another work to gain for them life. But myself, I see I get the chance because I went to school. I can understand what's going on. then I get the chance to go to the international level to understand what's going on. So my peoples are there. They never create anything, but they are victims. So if someone have to do that, it's me. I'm saying like God is choosing me. I have to save them. I get a lot of proposition like from the government to do the work, to get a salary. I never gain a salary like doing a work at the end of the month. I know that I'm going to get like $5. No. Because why? Because I want to work for my community. I believe on this work, then I believe that I have to do that for them. Who is going to do that if I didn't do it? And they have to get them voice here somewhere. And it have to grow up like a little Hindu, a lot around the communities where we can raise these issues. So someone have to sacrifice and someone have to do that. So it's a duty. It's not like by choice, but it's a duty to save your identity, to save your community, to save your people. But at the end of the day, you are saving the world because we are talking about the global air that we are breathing, global water that we are drinking, and the global atmosphere that we are saving. So personally, that's how I'm feeling and what I'm doing. I'm going to do that all my life. Then I have to do it, actually.
Kia ora. I guess I'm fortunate or I'm unfortunate. Unfortunately, it's in my DNA, I think. I'm a Māori, and our tribe was the first to take up arms against colonisation, and we're the last to stop fighting. Actually haven't stopped fighting, just took up another strategy. I understand what you're saying, though, that there are challenges, and it is a heavy burden to carry. Fortunately, in my own village, I was chosen at an early age and mentored by elders, and they're ones that who were interested in, who are very knowledgeable in the environment, and so I can always lean on them, for that safety. And when we come to these places, we're on our own, but we know that we're not actually spiritually on our own. Our ancestors are with us. And back home, we established a network of other people working in similar fields so that we could support one another. And of course, very fortunate that in this area, have these comrades here that, although we have difficult times, we still have fun and we really strongly support one another and understand the struggles that we all face. So, yeah, I would encourage establishing a good, strong, tight network around you with really good mentors. Kia ora.
Yeah, and thank you for your very difficult question. You hear me? Yeah?
Now you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, so I usually get the question of, well, do you have faith in all of these climate change relations? Is this going to help or are we going to solve it? And my answer is no, I don't really have faith that it's going to end up good or well. But at least I know that when my time comes, I did everything I could. And when it's as most tragical, and when you try to just when you don't really know how to continue, you just continue. And you have a light, and you have a vision, and you have some force that are getting your power. And I get my power back from the reindeers and from the mountains. So I go home, and then I go to work, and then I go home, and then I recharge, and I keep on doing that with the support of other brilliant people around me. But it's just something that you have to do, that when your time is coming, and you know that you did everything that you could.
Well, in my case, sometimes it's very discouraging to remember how people from my own community beat us and were turning us over to the police. Nevertheless, when I'm among all of you, when I see the children who continue going to the forest, when I see that there are still shepherds who, despite the fact that they question, why are we struggling, they continue, they're still taking charge of their sheep, and I say, well, some of the task has been accomplished. The forest is there. The trees that they cut down have sprouted once again. There are new branches everywhere. It's a little bit disorderly, but they're there. And the eagles return to the forest. And we continue seeing those animals that you saw in the slides. These are chameleons. It's a species of reptile that looks like a little miniature dinosaur, and that we take them and we put them to sleep, and we let them sleep. And when we see that a new child has discovered how to do this, we say, well, it was worth it. Among all of the bruises and the fear and being beat up, it was worth it. And when I think, for example, in that my mother, far from attending the assemblies, far from supporting the struggle, went to my home to visit me and saw me completely beaten up. And she said to me, you see what you were looking for? And that I had the strength to be able to tell her, you know what, Mom? You don't belong in my house like with that. Between you and I, we were raised by the same mother because I was raised by my grandparents. There was a great difference. And maybe that difference was what my grandparents with me were able to carry out ceremonies with me. They were able to plant my umbilical cord in the forest. And maybe they were able to tell me other stories that they didn't tell my mother. And there are a lot of minds that have been colonized, but there's also those of us who are resisting. And so, well, we just have to continue onward.
Great. Was there one? Where's our helper? Oh, there she is. I think this is the last question. We have one other. Okay, yeah.
I really like to thank all four of you. You've shown, to me at least, I'm sure to other people as well, the beauty and the complexity of indigenous way of thinking, from poetic to analytical, from very locally community-based to possibly being able to generalize on a much larger scale. And at least from my coming here to Rising Voices, and this is the third year that I've been coming, you really made an incredible impression on me, all four of you. Mrs. Sanchez, specifically for you, I'm so glad that you spoke the way you did, because you showed in a very, very real way the connection between the state and the corporation, and this whole joke called tax on emission. No legal regulation really has reached the point of understanding that yet, not even in European Union, let alone here in the United States. I'm not quite sure actually what's happening in Mexico. But I think that you're raising an extraordinarily important question, not only about sovereignty and autonomy that you've talked about, but about global way to deal with very dangerous neoliberal policies that are destroying resources and de-emphasizing anything and everything that is based on relationship. And hearing four of you gives me hope that there is a potential for social network and social movement that really combines all indigenous people and allies as well. So thank you so much.
Wanted to take the? Do you want to take that last question before they? Yeah. Why don't you take the last question and then? Yeah.
So I missed the first two because I had to leave. I live here, unfortunately. There's another conference going on in Denver about climate change and the arts this very day, so I had to go back. So you may have already said this. My question is, if you can say times when you've been talking especially to politicians or policymakers or people in those realms, in those worlds, and you have not been able to get through to the person, and then all of a sudden there's some thing or some metaphor or some image that you've been able to find that caused a transformation or a transition in their understanding. Could you say what that is, that maybe could be used by other people as well?
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me give you the example of how we lead the negotiation as indigenous peoples to get what we want there. Because most of the countries, when you say indigenous peoples, they say, no way, we are not here, we are not negotiating this one. So on the climate change, when we come with the ideas of we want to have indigenous people's rights to be into the Paris agreements, you know what they said? All of them, like, they talked together as countries. They said, no, human rights is going to be discussed in Geneva. We have nothing to do with human rights there. Nothing has to be there. So then we get so upset. Then in Lima, it was 3,000 papers into the Paris agreements. We come in Geneva in the human rights place, and then we start negotiating. Then in this one, they accept to put indigenous people rights into the Article 2 of the Paris agreements. So the reason we said why, because is it because we are in the human rights country? Human rights conventions city or something like that. So there was initiated by Latin America countries. So 19 countries come together. They said, listen, we do have a climate change who are impacting the rights of the peoples. So we have to put this one into the tables, because if it's not into the Paris Agreement now, the upcoming solutions are not going to take into consideration this one. So when some countries take the lead on it, then from our side, we have our own strategy to go through a side events. We say we have to show a case studies, a concrete case studies. Like myself, 2015, 2016, in the French network, I write a report, like a position papers. I can share with everyone who wanted, into the human rights and climate change impact on human rights. And in this one, I showed like examples on concrete case studies there, and where we shared with the peoples. And many other indigenous peoples from the regions did the same. And we discussed with our government. We lobbied them. We said, if you didn't talk about the human rights impact, indigenous people's rights impact, sooner or later you are going to be the victims. So then they start to understand, to say, oh, well, maybe it's not the short term. Let us see that into the long term. But we come in Paris, it wasn't happening like that. They took the human rights into the Article 2 out. And then we have to come back. Then our strategy is standing out. Like you saw into the photos that Andrea showed in us, that we come out, we shout, we stand, we use media, we use like internet, we use every possibility that to tell them it's important, we have to get there. And then we use the very Pacific voices to go through the friendly countries that we organize the indigenous peoples dialogue between us and the friendly state, 2 days, to show them clearly why we want to have indigenous people's knowledge, why we want to have indigenous people rights, and where we want to have it, and how we are going to implement it. During 2 days, we negotiate with them, and then they say we are going to support you. And then now, we create a network of people who are supporting us and friendly with us. We get them emails, and that they get advocate for us. But it's not easy. It's still, we are going to face this one into the next coming weeks during the 2 days that I'm talking about. It's not going to be fun. especially US, is not supportive. It's not supportive at all, but they have a big voice into all the UN negotiations. And then we say, why? Because they have them little ideas behind that business is the first, but business is destroying the life of the peoples. And climate change is not a business issue. Climate change is a life, peoples. It's life and survival of the peoples. And that's the things missing by the some state. So we have to take the emotional way and the person, talking to the person, but not talking to the machine. And that can change them. But it's very big fight. But we have to do that, and we have to go through it.
I think that's about all the time we have right now. We have to move on to but tomorrow afternoon we'll be having a similar conversation, and if people want to also participate and contribute to that, once again, please thank all the panelists, and you'll be able to interact with them also in the breakout sessions, and Berenice will be able to get, I know she wanted to say something, but we have to get to the next panel. Yeah.
I think there are hardly words. Just a sec. Getting there. Almost at break. There are barely words. That's why we do this. We do have more time to continue exactly the thread of that conversation. That thread will bring us into tomorrow, and then by the time we get to Saturday, we will be fully within that type of conversation, that direction. Let me mention a couple of things. First, I did add the website up here, so it's on the slides now. This is where the presentations that presenters are happy for us to share will turn up under a tab for Rising Voices 5. We have a break now, and then at 3 o'clock, we have a session for discussion, as promised, more time to talk about things and to talk about specific themes, which we will introduce in just a moment. These are also, I'll go through these. These are the venues for the breakout groups. We have structured the discussion sessions so that there's actually several chances to talk. There's this afternoon and then twice tomorrow as well. Today, we're really hoping that the conversation anchors around knowledge and knowledge sources and how collaborations in terms of gathering knowledge and building knowledge collaboratively can happen. Tomorrow, those conversations shift to talking about the pathways to action based on that knowledge. So we realize that's somewhat of a false distinction, that knowledge can be fully separated from action, right? But we're also hoping that there's a bit of a storyline there where you can start with the knowledge base, and tomorrow we move into the actions that are inspired from that. We have several themes here, 5 themes. As Julie mentioned this morning, energy is a new one to join the themes. These themes, we've been talking along these same themes for a few years. They originally came from some of the themes in the Indigenous Peoples Climate Change chapter in the National Climate Assessment, the last one. So we will have 2 breakout groups per theme. These themes are water, energy, phenology, relocation, and health and livelihood. So, choose where you want to make your contribution, the discussion you would like to have today and tomorrow. If possible, stay with the same group so that there's continuity throughout the breakout group opportunities. This is where the breakout groups will be located. So we were thinking a couple water groups at the north end of this room, a couple energy groups at the south end of this room, but you guys can negotiate that space. 2 groups discussing phenology can fit in room 3131, which is upstairs. You can either take the stairs or the elevator and follow signs to 3131. There should be these flip charts in those rooms as well. 3131 is missing 1 flip chart. So if a volunteer who's going to join the phenology group could take one of these flip charts up with them, that would be wonderful. Or make a team, so a couple people carry it up. One relocation group could be just out here in the foyer, in the lobby. And another relocation group in 2607, which is on the 2nd floor. Again, follow the signs. Please jot down these notes where you want to end up so that you know where you're headed when you walk out. And then 2 health and livelihood groups, one in 2603, also on the 2nd floor, and another in 3150 on the 3rd floor. Hopefully this isn't terribly complicated, but we will be walking the halls and find anyone who's lost. Let's see. There will be facilitators and note takers in these groups. The facilitators we've asked, because we had to really shorten our opportunity to introduce each other, that you spend the first couple minutes of the breakout discussion just introducing yourself with those who have a common interest with you. And so the facilitators will help that. Then I'm going to go into logistics. Do you have something else about breakout group? Okay. If that all makes sense, any questions about the breakout groups? Does that make sense? Those will start at 3 o'clock. Okay. So we weren't going to come back in here. We're just going to. Right. And so then, if you start your conversations about 3 o'clock, by 4:30, we're hoping you'll be hungry again, and that's when pizza should be here. We're hoping we can be outside for the pizza, so join us at 4:30 for pizza. We're not going to convene again as a big group today. So after pizza at 4:30, I guess we have 3 different buses that will come at 5. They will come here about 4:40. What would that be? 5:15. By 5:30, they will be leaving. So please make sure, if you want to be on a bus, that you are on a bus. Of those 3, 2 of them will go to the Naropa University campus, where we will have a public event this evening. And we hope that you will go to that. It's an informal addition to the meeting, so it's really optional. It's up to you. You are very welcome to join it. If you prefer not to join that public event, choose the bus that is going straight to the hotel if you're staying at the Holiday Inn Express, because the 3rd bus will take you there. I assume that the buses will say their destination, but if not, I will be out there to help. The public event will be from 6 to 7:30 at the Nolanda Event Center on the Naropa campus for anybody who has their own transportation. There is a flyer about that should have gone out to you in email, but ask us if you have any questions. Tomorrow morning, we'll do a similar thing. The buses will leave the hotel at 7:45, and we'll have coffee and tea at 8. I think that's it. So hopefully you'll have really enriching discussions in your breakout groups, and we'll see you here and there, but we'll see you all together as a group tomorrow morning.
And just one quick announcement, because a whole bunch of people are asking me what happened with the film. So we are going to show it tomorrow during each break and twice during lunch. So there was just a rendering delay. But now it's all set. So we'll show it a few times tomorrow, and really hope that you all join this evening. So thank you.
I can give you this one also. It's right here, but let me walk up with you. I'm not here. Really quickly, if you are a facilitator, could you please just roll up front if you haven't left this room already? Facilitators for the breakout group and note takers for the breakout groups, please come up front just super quickly before you head up or over.